I'm finally designing my version of Noah's Ark. I'm a big believer in research. The internet is handy, libraries are better, but research trips are the best. The dream research trip would be visiting Mount Ararat in Turkey, but at this stage that's a long way to go to look at, well, possible landing spots at best. The next best thing is investigating how other people have designed this vessel. There are endless artistic interpretations of this thing spanning cultures and history. But there's an extra level of problem solving required when you actually build it. Figuring it out in 3 dimensions, using real materials, even on a smaller scale, forces you to consider the design in a deeper way. The next step up from there is building a life-size approximation. I was able to visit the Ark Encounter in Kentucky to see how they took on this massive design challenge. Only research trips can give you a sense of scale, of mass, from a horse to a dinosaur skeleton to the hull of a huge wooden ship. I think that standing in the presence of something, feeling the small but undeniable pull of gravity that it generates, changes the way you draw them. I was able to talk to a few of the designers, and they explained some of their thought process behind things like water collection, animal and food storage, waste management, natural light, hull design, and a ton of other things. My favorite part was the human touch of Noah's library. It wasn't just humans and animals preserved on the ship, but knowledge and stories as well. When it comes to designing the Shipwright's Ark, I have different design requirements. First, let me free a small percentage of my audience from a mental trap I know they're prone to fall into. My version is being designed for story first. Dead Gods is starting its life on paper as a graphic novel, and that means it doesn't have to be 100% physically functional. There will be no engineering stress tests, and its seaworthiness must be implied rather than proven. Don't interpret that as me not caring. I wouldn't do research excursions if that was the case. I don't want it to be realistic, I want it to be believable. The primary text gives some very specific dimensions. I've heard there are interesting ideas from secondary sources that may imply the ship to be circular and a few other ideas. However, one of the core principles of this project is that if the biblical story and a secondary source differ, I'll be deferring to the biblical account. The dimensions given in Genesis 6 are measured in cubits, 300 in length, 50 in width, and 30 in height. Cubits are a body-based measurement, from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. The Shipwright is 7.5 feet tall, which means that his cubit would be bigger than ours. I made the decision to not break out a calculator and figure out what those proportions would be. This is where research trips can be beneficial. Using the justification of a larger cubit, I scaled the ship up until it felt as big on paper as it felt on my visit. I dispensed with the idea of tree slabs on the exterior, trading them for stripped tree trunks as interior support pillars. This is a way to show that the shipwright is someone who tries to work with creation rather than against it. Making an interior that looks, at least a little bit, like a forest demonstrates their appreciation for beauty and their desire to make the animals as comfortable as possible. With some progress made on the cross-section, I wanted to move on to the floor plan. I started with the common practice of civilizational ballast. To help keep the ship stable, they filled the bottom of the ship with the heavy building blocks of a new civilization. Everything that 4 households would need to start from scratch. Enough cut stone and lumber to build homes for a couple generations. As a side note, after it landed, I think that the ship itself would be dismantled from materials over the span of a generation or 2. There have been people that have gone looking for the remains of the ship over the years, and I think that if anything remained, it would be found in the structures of the earliest homes in the highlands of Ararat. In preparation for a totally new world, they also packed metals, fabrics, leather, farming equipment, vast quantities of seeds, anything that they would find useful before there were enough people to specialize in those industries. The first and second decks are devoted to animals and storage. As much fun as it would be to work out exactly how many animals would be on board and how much space they'd need, that would be an irresponsible use of time for my purposes. I can promise you that there won't be an episode in this story where we follow someone with a clipboard listing off every set of creatures that turns up. Again, believable, not realistic. The majority of the top deck is devoted to animals and storage as well, but a good portion is set aside for a garden. Most of their diet will be preserved food, but having some fresh fruits and vegetables helps to keep the passengers sane. I finished it off with a space for the family's private rooms, as well as a common space that doubles as the library. So instead of finishing things off with a tedious time-lapse build of the whole thing, I figured I would do a tour. This model is a sketch. Think of it as the underdrawing. Figuring out in 3D is so helpful, because again, you get that sense of scale, and there's some proportions you can really only figure out in 3D. There's still a lot to be figured out, but as a first step, it's a place to start. For the round door, I decided to set it low in the ship. This is partly thinking of it being easier to load the heavier animals, but also to make it easier to disembark after they've landed. And the large, heavy slab door would, when the ship is ready, roll into place. The primary text talks about it being closed by God, but I built a mechanism where the weight of it could be used to swing and pull the door tighter into place. Welcome on board. Let me show you around. There's the ramp to the upper levels. Like I said, the first and second decks are all about animals and storage. The lowest deck is primarily for the larger animals. I've been imagining that most of them would be brought on as juveniles to save on space because they're easier to deal with. Most of the dinosaurs that would have been brought on would be brought on as eggs, carefully incubated by other creatures. I was also thinking, rather than having a cage per pair, any creatures that are able to cohabitate could share space and socialize with each other. Moving up to the second deck, for this layer I stayed very consistent. Rows upon rows of shelves for cages and storage. They allow for easy management. There's a lot of height in these decks, so I used a lot of the upper space for hanging cargo. This would mostly be feed, but also other supplies. There's also a lot of space in between the decks which could be used for more cargo. One thing I decided to do for the sake of lighting is spread these pillars wider at the base, like an A-frame. That allows the second deck to be wider than the top, allowing more natural light to make its way down to the bottom. As major supports, there are 4 large trees that span from the top to the bottom, with circular staircases built around them to work their way up and down. The top deck, more animals, more storage, but this area I set aside for a garden, like a nursery for the new world. Along the decks, for the sake of reflecting more light down, old shields from the Shepherd King's kingdom before he became the Shipwright. His tools of war repurposed to help provide light. Down at the end, this is the family quarters. Each family has a separate section for their own sleep and storage, with a slatted wall to allow light in as needed. And finally, at the end, we have the common room that would also double as the Shipwright's library. And just because people ask, I made room for a kitchen, and there's room for other detailed things as well. Again, because this is a sketch, I really just need to figure out proportions where everything might be. Finally, a note on the rooftop. We've got a combination of raisable hatches as well as sheets of curved glass. So even when the roof is closed, it still allows natural light to come in. As you can see when flying through this space, it really is large. This location will be sure to appear in many flashbacks and cutaways. So there we have Phase 1 of Noah's Ark. So while work on the story continues, if you've been following this project, or maybe this is your first time, and you think, yeah, I think there should be more of that, there are a few ways that you can help that happen. Do all the usual YouTube button mashing. And if you have a friend that you think might be interested in this kind of thing, send them one of the trailers I've made, or maybe one of the videos. You can become a YouTube member, or join me on Patreon. Higher tier patrons get to join a private server where like-minded people who believe in storytelling are starting to congregate. Or if you want a one-shot way to support this project, you could pick up my art book or my previous story, Tellurian. I wanted to end on a quick note about generative AI. This project has not and will not be using it. Over the last couple years, I've investigated it. There are many commonly known reasons not to use it, so I won't go over all of them. There's one reason that I'll mention briefly, because I don't hear it as much. Have you ever heard something described as designed by committee or overproduced? It's a critique leveled against things that look so average, so safe, that they must be the product of too many individuals sanding down too many interesting corners. Generative AI, by its nature, is a machine built on design by committee. The output can certainly look polished, which can be impressive to people that don't know any better, but no matter how much you prompt, the results will never leave the middle. I think storytelling is communication, not a commodity. I would prefer not to have a digital committee of millions have my conversations for me. I'd especially prefer not to pay for the privilege of being cut out of this deeply human experience. Every part of what I draw is a conversation with you. It's built on my hard-won preferences, experiences, and hopes. For those that have been following for a while, I hope you'll agree that everything I draw is drawn with intention to tell a purposeful story. So I'll keep drawing. It'll mean I go a little slower. It will mean that sometimes I have to stop to sharpen my axe, to practice my figure drawing, maybe do a little fast and loose historical research. But at the end of the day, this story will be a conversation that's just between us.